It's the Jon Justice Show, and on this episode, we're talking movies. As always, if you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and if you happen to be enjoying this on YouTube, be sure to leave a comment on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Hit the alarm button so you never miss another episode. And listen, if you're into Depeche Mode, we're going to be talking music on this movies podcast as well. Or Star Wars. I do host a Depeche Mode and Star Wars podcast as well. And you can find those respectively under my name, Jon Justice, Jon, and Star Wars or Depeche Mode. But for today's episode, I want to focus specifically on movies and two films that I recently, over the course of the past 2 weeks, have gone to see in the theater. A Complete Unknown and Nosferatu, a remake of the 1922 film Nosferatu. Now, I'm currently on vacation from my full-time job. I don't go back on the air live until Monday, January 6th. So recording this on New Year's Eve, I was desperate to get back behind the mic. I'm about in that point of my vacation where it's like, all right, I want to start getting back and talking about stuff again. I got a lot to say. And both of these movies struck me positively in different ways. Now, before I get to that, on my Christmas break, typically what I do is I don't travel. We usually stay at home with the family. We enjoy the holidays. We enjoy Christmas and New Year's, and we watch a lot of movies. As a matter of fact, last year, I kept track of all the movies that I watched over my Christmas vacation, and I had forgotten until I started this holiday break that I never deleted that list from last year in my Mac notes. So as I went on vacation 2 Fridays ago, I decided, you know what? I'm going to keep track of how many movies I watch on this vacation, and it ended up becoming a challenge. I am very happy to say, depending on what your perspective is, that with still some 6 days to go in my vacation, I'm going to beat last year's record. For those that are interested, I will share with you the list of the movies that I've watched over my vacation so far at the end of this podcast, when I'm done reviewing the two films that I've actually gone out to the theaters to go and see. And let's start off first with my thoughts on A Complete Unknown. This is the Bob Dylan biopic directed by James Mangold. Ford versus Ferrari, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, 3:10 to Yuma, Logan, and an upcoming Star Wars Jedi Origin film. And listen, I am not a Bob Dylan fan. And I'm actually a person who would actively go and change the track immediately if a Dylan track were to come on. That being said, I absolutely loved this movie. And to call this a movie, too, isn't quite accurate. So this is the telling of the Bob Dylan story between his 1961 beginnings through 1965 and his turn away from folk music to a more electric sound. But it is more than that, while also not being much more than that. This film is both a conventional biopic, and I know some people say biopic, I say biopic. It's a conventional biopic while being unconventional, that you're really just an observer of these moments during these formidable years of Dylan's career. Now, you could look at that, you could hear me say that and go, well, isn't that what most movies are? And it's true, but there's no major conflict apart from Dylan wrestling with the public's fandom and Bob Dylan's response to it, and a desire to turn away from what the public and the music industry's expectations are of him. It's fairly well known that Bob Dylan is a bit of a jerk and an a-hole. That is depicted in this film, but not in an overtly negative way. It's a part of his persona that the people around him seem to just simply accept. I would sort of pin it as being more sarcastic, even though there are moments where he does act like kind of a jerk to the people around him. That being said, Bob Dylan gave his stamp of approval for this portrayal and for this, in this role. Timothy Chalamet, of whom I'm becoming an ever-increasing fan of his young work, even though there's not a lot of it. I absolutely love Dune Part 1 and 2. I thought he did a great job in Wonka as well, and even going back to one of his first appearances on the big screen in my son's favorite film and one of my favorite sci-fi movies, apart from Star Wars, Interstellar. He is just a fantastic actor, and I'm at the point now where I'm beginning to look forward to a film that he will be leading, and that was certainly one of the entry points for me going and seeing A Complete Unknown, considering that I was not a big Bob Dylan fan. That being said, he does a stellar job as Bob Dylan. Apparently, he learned how to play the guitar leading up to the filming of the movie. He does all of the performances of the film, and while he sounds like Bob Dylan in the numerous performances in A Complete Unknown, it's not an individual doing karaoke. Listening to some Bob Dylan songs after the film, sung by Bob Dylan. And again, this was not by choice. This was because my wife, Melinda, started to listen to the Essential Bob Dylan playlist on iTunes, and I happened to be around while this was playing, because again, I'm just not a fan of Bob Dylan's work. And hearing the original tracks, of which I've heard, many, many times, even though I've never sought it out, it speaks to the importance that Bob Dylan has on, the history of music here in the United States and across the planet. I've just never been a big fan, but I certainly respect and understand what his influence was on rock and roll. Timothée Chalamet's performance sounds like Dylan, but it's not a carbon copy. And when listening to the original Bob Dylan tracks, I can see more of the distinction. But he does a great job in portraying Bob Dylan while not being just a karaoke version, if that makes sense. And again, there are many musical performances in the film, and I was absolutely riveted by every single one of the musical performances by Timothée Chalamet in the movie. Even for songs that I would even go so far as to say I actively dislike. But in the context of the film, it made sense and it made it enjoyable, while I still would not go out and listen to the soundtrack of the film, if that makes sense. Monica Barbaro, who played Joan Baez, and again, another young actress of whom I'm increasingly becoming a fan, and I'm glad that she had the opportunity to do this film. Most notably, she played Phoenix in Top Gun Maverick, and she just has, being a young, beautiful woman, she has a persona, in my opinion, where it almost demands to be on the silver screen, and there was something compelling even with that side character in Top Gun Maverick, to which I said after that film came out, that, she's going to end up being a major star. But she hasn't really done anything relevant since then. Certainly not anything of major box office success or fame beyond what she did for Top Gun Maverick until this film and her portrayal of Joan Baez. And again, having no reference point whatsoever for Joan Baez. I thought she did an absolutely fantastic job. Elle Fanning's performance as Dylan's on and off again girlfriend was probably my favorite performance of her, apart from when she was in Super 8, and she was obviously much, much younger in this movie. But again, this is not an actress that I would say, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing Elle Fanning. I just know who she is. And she just gave an absolutely amazing performance. Now, her name in the film as Sylvie is not the name of Bob Dylan's girlfriend in real life. After we saw the movie, I went and did some research to find out what in the movie was accurate and what wasn't accurate. And there was a lot of inaccuracies in the film, certainly done to condense the story down in those years between 61 and 65, and moments and points in Bob Dylan's career of things that happened that were portrayed just simply in different ways, while the general story that was being told was accurate, even though some of the details, the names and places have been changed to protect the innocent, kind of thing. But at Bob Dylan's request, the actual name of his girlfriend that Elle Fanning portrayed was changed for the movie, which I just thought was kind of weird. I mean, because anybody can just do it. I didn't go look up the person's name, but for the same time, he must have had his own, well, he did. He had his own personal reasons, of which were not disclosed, as to why he wanted that name change. That being said, it was a fantastic performance. And it's interesting, too, getting back to how this film is kind of unconventional as a movie. Like, it is a movie, but I'm hesitant to go and call it that because of the way it played out. And I have a better description that I'll share with you in just a moment. But when you look at the conflict in the movie, you kind of have this expectation, not knowing anything about Bob Dylan, when he has these relationships, whether it's with Elle Fanning's character or whether it's Monica Barbaro playing Joan Baez. You are watching it going, oh, okay, this is where the central conflict is going to come into play. And then it doesn't. And not in a bad way, but it again, sort of the expectations that you have as a typical movie goer and waiting for a central theme or conflict to arise, and then it doesn't, the movie just kind of moves along. Not in a bad way, just doesn't end up meeting the expectations of what you would typically find in a story about an up-and-coming musician. If it were written as fiction, there, of course, more than likely would be that type of conflict, whether it's because of personal relationships or drug abuse, fighting with the label. There really aren't any of those things in this story. It's a rather uncontroversial telling of Bob Dylan's early career. Even though it does have its moments of controversy, they're never anything that you can focus on or walk away from the film going, that was the central conflict that he needed to overcome. It's just not in the film. And even at the film's 2 hours and 20-ish minutes, it never dragged for me. And I wasn't waiting for the movie to end. And I should probably take this moment and make this sort of caveat on my movie reviews of my view of how I look at films. First off, I don't ever go and recommend movies because everybody's tastes are different. And that's one of the things that I wanted to key in on, because all of this is subjective. Every single person's, when it comes to art, music, movies, you name it, it's subjective. It all depends on, what it is that you are entertained by. And I always get annoyed when people look at films in an objective way. It's one thing if a film isn't shot right or if there are mistakes in the movie, that's one thing. But how a film is written, the way that it's directed, the cinematography, it's all subjective. And that certainly is going to be more appropriate when I get into my thoughts on Nosferatu, a movie that was challenging to say the least, especially compared to A Complete Unknown, and I won't even do that because these films are on two completely different levels. Now, getting back to A Complete Unknown, though, again, at 2+ hours, there was never a moment in the film that I felt dragged, and the hallmark for a movie that I know that I'm enjoying is one where I'm sitting in the theater, and one, I'm not waiting for it to end, like I want to get out of the theater, we can end the movie now, or I do not want it to end. And this film was borderline me not wanting to end. Like, if it had gone on for another half hour at the pace and in terms of quality of what I had seen so far, I probably would have been completely okay with that. You compare it to, say, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which I also went to the theater to go see, but I won't be reviewing it here. Both of my sons, now 22 and 18, enjoy those Sonic movies. And I had a good time in the theater seeing Sonic 3. It's not a movie that I ever need to see again. And that was a film where I was watching it going, okay, we can wrap it up already. I've seen enough of, I've seen enough animated hedgehogs now. I'm good. A Complete Unknown was almost a documentary shot like a biopic. There wasn't a ton of dialogue in it. What was there in terms of the script was solid, but nothing earth-shattering. I can't seem to recall any moments where there were sort of your Oscar bait moments of somebody delivering a speech that you look at and you go, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. That is why this person will be nominated for an Oscar. That being said, I could certainly see Timothée Chalamet and his portrayal of Bob Dylan, especially given the historical significance of Bob Dylan, of him being nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. And that being said, Edward Norton's portrayal of Pete Seeger, another individual of which I have no history of whatsoever, apart from the fact that he wrote This Land Is Your Land, he did a fantastic job as that character. I have no idea if it's close to the actual Pete Seeger. That being said, he was also another amazing character that I could have watched and seen even more of in the film. Every single main actor, and I pretty much laid them all out, between Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro, Timothée Chalamet, and Edward Norton. I mean, those are pretty much your key players. The individual, and I can't remember his name right now, but the guy that ended up playing, and he's in a lot of James Mangold's films, who ended up playing Johnny Cash, did a fantastic job as well. But getting back to how the film is portrayed, how the story is portrayed, again, it's almost like a documentary shot like a biopic. There's not a ton of dialogue. There were plenty of performances, and there's a ton of music in the film, and there really isn't any clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. And even the official climax of the film, doing that thing with my fingers, air quotes, while not dramatic, was still effective enough to bring this compelling film to a close. As I said at the start of my review, Ford vs. Ferrari by Mangold is one of my favorite true story films, and A Complete Unknown will certainly rank up there as one of my favorite musician-focused biopics. The first one that comes to mind probably would be Bohemian Rhapsody, which for me personally has a lot in common with A Complete Unknown because I'm not a big Queen fan. That being said, there are Queen songs that I will seek out and listen to, but I don't think I've ever listened to a Queen album top to bottom ever. And I would almost say that it's tough between the two of them. Between Bohemian Rhapsody, a movie which I really, really enjoy, and Complete Unknown, I would probably put A Complete Unknown just slightly under Bohemian Rhapsody because I like the music I like the music more in Bohemian Rhapsody, but I thought the portrayal of both Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody and, again, Timothée Chalamet was absolutely stellar. So this is a film that I will probably end up owning, where I walked out of the theater and didn't think that I would, and was thinking to myself, and this is exactly the same thing that happened to me with Nosferatu as well. I walked out of the theater going, I really enjoyed that. I don't know if I'll watch it again, but I'll really enjoy that. And now, after having spent some time away from it and getting ready for the reviews today, I realized that, no, I actually do want to go watch this again, and it is one that I probably would like to have on my Blu-ray shelf. So if you've seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment there. Now this brings me to Nosferatu. And this was a different one for me. I'm not a fan of Robert Eggers, who directed the film. Did The Lighthouse, never saw it, never want to see it based off of what I've seen. I did see The Witch, of which I'm going to go and revisit now after seeing Nosferatu. But I ended up watching The Witch over a course of a few nights before I go to bed. I go to bed early because I got to get up at 2:30 in the morning, so typically I'm in bed by 6:30, and usually I watch something on my laptop for a half hour, 45 minutes before I, turn on my music and go to sleep. And The Witch was one that I'd heard great things about. I'm fairly certain that my good friend, my dear friend Drew, who passed away a few years ago, had recommended to me, and I think it was on his recommend that I ended up watching that movie. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't one that I needed to revisit. Nosferatu, when it was first announced, I didn't have much interest in it. I'd never seen the original, and I'll talk about this here in just a moment. And I didn't really have any desire based off the director because he's not a director that I lean into. Now, that being said, after seeing the first trailer for Nosferatu and coming to the realization, because I just hadn't done the research, that this was a very similar story. Let me back up. I was unfamiliar with the original Nosferatu story, in that the original 1922 silent German expressionist vampire film directed by F.W. Murnau was based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's when my interest was piqued, and I'll explain why here in just a moment. That original film, again, 1922, starring Max Schreck as Count Orlok, who would be Dracula, who a vampire who preys on the wife of his estate agent and brings the plague to their town. Okay, and so this is the same story that's being told in the original 1922 Nosferatu. As a matter of fact, from the reviews that I've listened to of the film, there were many that were fans of the original 1922 film that were surprised at how close the story aligned with that original Nosferatu. So, if you haven't seen the 2024 version and you've seen the 1922 version, then you know the story up front. Now, that being said, I am a huge fan of Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is easily my favorite vampire film. It is a film that I watch every single year over Halloween. And based off of the first trailer for Nosferatu, I immediately recognized, oh, this is that story. Now, that being said, while the stories share the same baseline, Robert Eggers has brought a sense of realism when compared to the more fantastical, dreamlike, and adventurous version, and slightly more commercial, but not by much, of Bram Stoker's tale as told by Francis Ford Coppola. Both films, and I'll just say up front, of the 2024 version of Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula are fantastic in their own right. It's almost unfair to compare the two, as the directors both executed their versions so precisely and with amazing directorial craft. Now, Nosferatu stars Bill Skarsgård of probably It fame is the one. He recently did The Crow, which bombed like crazy. He plays a great weirdo and does the same in portraying Orlok, again, with my fingers, Dracula, in Nosferatu. Nicholas Hoult, who I wouldn't say I'm a fan of, even though I really enjoy his work. I most recently saw him in an incredibly underrated film, Juror Number 2, which is available now, I believe, on either Peacock or Max. A film which didn't get any attention in the box office, but was great. That's one of the films on the list of movies that I watched over my vacation. Lily Rose Depp, of whom I've had no connection with whatsoever. Apparently she was on a show called The Idol, and she is the daughter of Johnny Depp. Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's from, Godzilla. He was in Bullet Train. He was one of the main characters in, what was Fall Guy? Man, he plays a stuntman. I kept thinking, the movie's called Stuntman. I was like, no, it's not Stuntman, it's Fall Guy. Emma Corrin, who played the villain, the bald villain, in Deadpool and Wolverine, and of course, Willem Dafoe, who I don't need to mention what he's been in. He's been in a ton of things. So, getting into the story in and of itself. In the 1830s, estate agent Thomas Hutter travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok, again, Dracula, as a prospective client. In his absence, Hutter's new bride, Ellen, is left under the care of their friends Frederick and Anna Harding. Plagued by horrific visions and an increasing sense of dread, Ellen soon encounters an evil force that's far beyond her control. So let me jump to what I was going to say towards the end of the film. And again, I don't recommend movies because everybody's tastes are different. And I'm not going to be recommending this film, even though now having about 24 hours away from it, my view on it has shifted, and I'll explain why here in just a moment. I'm not recommending this movie because, again, everybody sort of has their own standards of what they enjoy in films, and this movie is certainly different. And it is violent, and it is graphic. So let me start off with some of the items that aren't related to any of that. The authenticity of the 1830s depiction in this film is truly miraculous. I've never seen anything like this in a movie before. The only thing I could probably compare it to would be The Witch, of which, again, I'm not that familiar with, having only watched it once on a laptop. And that was a very sort of confined film of a family in the forest dealing with super, natural things that are taking place and affecting the youngest daughter played by Anna Taylor-Joy. But even in that, depicting what I think was also either the 17 or the 1800s, did a fantastic job. This, in showing the 1830s, and especially the town in Germany of which it was depicting, was just incredible. The night scenes are tinged in blue, almost teetering on a blue and white, black and white cinematography. And this was when needed. I mean, this was all appropriate in terms of the context of the film, when they needed to set the tone and a sense of dread. While the daylight moments, I wouldn't say are vibrant with color, except by comparison to the bleakness of the evening shots. And while the interior settings by candlelight are absolutely stunning, like based off of the limited amount of light available, I mean, it really does look like they're shooting inside with only candlelight. And that being said, the fact that they got it on film, because you know how dark that would be, I mean, it truly is astonishing. I've never watched a movie before where I've been so interested to see how they lit it to make it look the way that it did. I mean, you could easily just play the soundtrack, which was phenomenal, and watch the film without any dialogue whatsoever. Its cinematography was simply that engrossing. And it was something right out of the gate that I noticed as well. Orlok, the villain, is a deep-throated, accented embodiment of simply pure evil. In an interview with the director, Robert Eggers said that he wanted this version of Orlok, Dracula, to be different than what was done before. If you're familiar with the Francis Ford Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula, you know that Gary Oldman's character playing Dracula goes through several changes throughout the film. You know, and at one point when he finally meets the love interest protagonist of the film, Mina, played by Winona Ryder, he has now transformed himself into a handsome young man. Okay, you don't get any of that with Orlok. He's more zombie than anything else. And Robert Eggers said he chose to make him like that because essentially he is the undead. He's a walking corpse, which ends up making the relationship between him and his victim in this film being Lily Rose Depp. Depp, the object of his unquenchable desire. It makes it even more disturbing because of how he looks. In the beginning of the film, he's out of frame, out of focus. You don't really get to see him in full until you get much further into the film, and that's by design and reason. Because by the time you end up seeing Orlok in his entirety, at one of the most pivotal moments of the film, I mean, you truly get the sense of what your mind had been filling in the gaps of just how atrocious this walking abomination is. He's wholly threatening while moving slowly in just the way that he speaks. And, you know, Bill Skarsgård's performance, it's worthy of I don't know if it would be Best Actor. I would assume he probably would be maybe more appropriate for him to be nominated as supporting actor than actor. I mean, he's in the film a lot, so that's... I would think that if there was going to be a Best Actor award nomination, it would probably go to Nicholas Hoult. Although while his performance was spectacular, I don't see him getting a nomination for that performance. The biggest difference between Bram Stoker's Dracula, done by Francis Ford Coppola, and this version of Nosferatu is that in Coppola's version, it really was a love story. I mean, it's in the tagline of the film, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, because I'm a hopeless romantic, even when we're talking about vampires. But the tagline for the film is Love Never Dies. Dracula's love for Mina in Coppola's movie, of which he sees the wife who ended up committing suicide after she thought that he had been killed in battle. Eventually, Mina is also seduced, and she has a love for Dracula, even though in the film you kind of don't know whether or not it really is her or if it's him using, Dracula powers on him. In Eggers' version, Orlok, it has Orlok making Lily Rose Depp's Ellen Hunter more conflicted in her desire to be with him. or whether or not she wants to stay with her husband, Thomas. And I don't want to get into too many spoilers here, but it's pretty clear at the beginning of the story that whatever feelings that Lily Rose Depp has, whatever feelings that the Ellen character has, which is the true protagonist in the movie, you really don't know whether or not, and you kind of get the sense that this is beyond her control. That Orlok has put a spell on her, and she is now conflicted because of that spell. I wrestled walking out of the theater after seeing this with Melinda, and we both sort of come to the same conclusion now with 24 Hours, of, coming to terms with saying that I enjoyed the movie, I liked or loved the movie, because of how, for lack of a better way to say it, extreme it was. But therein lies the art of being realistic, relatively speaking, to the world that we're talking about. Realistically, being put face to face with pure evil and debauchery in the absence of God. Appreciation is probably a better way of describing it, and while I thought to myself, and Melinda said the same thing, that we didn't need to watch it again, now I do want to watch it again, and this too is a film that I think I would want to have on my Blu-ray shelves. It really is a stunning film on almost all levels. Plus, having the physical version at home, you can zip past some of the more egregious scenes. And again, I am in no way going to recommend this film, as it's absolutely not for everyone. But it is the most cinematic horror film that I have ever seen, both compelling, beautiful, and disturbing, to the point of having to turn away a few times, and yet it still has a level of accessibility, even though it rides a line of being an art house film and being commercially viable. For what it's worth, Chris Columbus of Chris Columbus fame, this would be the Home Alone Chris Columbus, this would be Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chris Columbus. He was actually a producer on the film, and Robert Eggers, the director, said that he was on set and actually helping him guide the story a bit. This was a film that Robert Eggers had in his mind as a kid that he wanted to remake if he became a director, even going so far as to stage a high school play based off of the 1922 movie. And it seems pretty clear that there were moments in the film where it could have deviated into more abstract art house, and it reined in to tell a more linear and understandable story that really did end up benefiting the film in the end. The moments of depicted depravity in the film, they were not overly gratuitous, and while they could have been removed from the film, and I'm speaking specifically to the sex scenes, of which there are just a few, it's completely understandable why they would be included in the movie, considering the subject matter of essentially a demon who has renounced God and the ramifications of that. I was reading online some commentary, and Steve Dace had written a review of which I agreed quite a bit with. As a matter of fact, I think I have it here. I'll go ahead and read. This is what Steve Dace had to say. Those that are unfamiliar with him, he's just another talk show host. He says it's one of the most stunningly shot movies he's ever seen this year, based off one of the most famous movies of the silent era, which was based on Bram Stoker's classic Dracula. Not a single profanity is uttered throughout, because it doesn't skimp on portraying the behaviors of its villain as well as the horrors he inspires. The movie also shows the dangers of opening door to the occult and naively thinking that you can harness the darkness to satisfy your own needs and desires. He went on to say this is one of the best movies that he's seen in 2024. However, even while he's on, always keep in mind that Robert Eggers' stylings aren't for everyone, and he's absolutely correct in that. And I saw somebody make a comment under Steve's post that said, how could you watch a film like this as a Christian? And listen, for many individuals, it's completely justifiable. If you just simply don't want to put yourself in front of content like that, I completely understand it. And for what it's worth, we typically do. We're not seeking out explicit content. A lot of times, though, when I end up watching a film like this and not having done research beforehand and I see there are these scenes in here, For me, it's a matter of what you take with you. And this is something that my father taught me when I was really young, when I first started listening to, to secular music, right? We're surrounded by sins. And this film is a grim and yet masterful portrayal of the selfish, rotten, sinful nature of man who has given himself to evil and the debauchery in his pursuit to fill the hole in his soul and the impact that it has on those around him. The director even said, Robert Eggers, that he didn't set out to have any sort of message in the film. He didn't make the movie saying, this is the theme and this is the message I want people to take away. He just simply wanted to tell the tale. And that completely helps in serving the story above everything. Lily Rose Depp is the protagonist, along with her husband, Nicholas Holtz Thomas. They both do an incredible job. And it's incredibly compelling to watch Orlok, who, while terrifying, is also riveting whenever he appears on screen. I'm not going to go so far as to say this is my favorite movie of 2024. I have my own standards for that. I will say that it is the most well-crafted story that I have seen this year. Even though the subject matter is really, really difficult to sort of deal with. I love the Dracula story in and of itself. And ultimately, I preferred the version that Francis Ford Coppola told in his Bram Stoker's Dracula. It almost makes me wish that I could have seen Robert Eggers do his version of not the 1922 version of Nosferatu. I would love to see Eggers' version of the 1990s version of Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. But this is a movie that really, stuck with me. And again, I walked away saying, glad I saw it. Not sure I'd watch it again, to wanting to sit down less than 24 hours later and put together a couple of reviews for the podcast. So, again, I'd love to hear from you. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. So, as promised, of the movies that I've watched so far over this Christmas vacation, with little commentary, we'll kind of go through the list. This is mostly in order. So, Sonic the Hedgehog, yes, 1, 2, and 3, because my boys made me watch the first two because they didn't want me to be lost in watching number 3. Juror number 2, which I mentioned before. Star Wars The Last Jedi, Inception, Black Widow, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Hell or High Water, because we've been on a Landman kick and a Taylor Sheridan kick as of late. Lethal Weapon 1, 2, and 3, because my boys had never seen those movies, so we watched those over the course of a few days. Nightmare Before Christmas, Just Friends, Office Christmas Party, Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, the prequel to the other films. One of my favorites, by the way. Klaus, the animated Christmas movie on Netflix that we had never seen, which was fantastic, by the way. The animated version of The Grinch, Iron Man 3, another Christmas movie staple, along with Elf. Contact, because I ended up getting the Blu-ray for Christmas. I can't believe I didn't own that movie. It's spectacular and has a lot in common with Interstellar. Had no idea. Or hadn't really thought about it until I watched Contact, and both Logan and I were going, oh my gosh, Christopher Nolan took a lot from Contact when he made Interstellar. As I talked about, A Complete Unknown, we ended up watching the live action How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey. Jurassic World Dominion, because I hadn't watched it in a while. BlackBerry, the story of the BlackBerry cell phone, which was fantastic. It's available on Hulu. Again, don't recommend it, but if you like true story tales, that was an interesting one. So check that one out if you're into those. Most of Love Actually, I kind of spaced that out. I was skipping through a couple of parts, but we usually watch that movie every year. Tangled, one of my favorite Disney animated films. Truth be told, we started it before vacation, but didn't finish it until after vacation. Nosferatu, just watched Firefox last night, Clint Eastwood's movie. Hadn't seen that in a long time. Owned the Blu-ray, and Logan had never seen it. Man of Steel. Just watched that one as well because Kyle had never seen Man of Steel. So that's where we are right now, and I have no idea what we're watching this evening. I hope you enjoyed this dual movie review of A Complete Unknown and Nosferatu. And before I let you go, I want to encourage you, if you want to support the Jon Justice Show and you like to read science fiction, I've written a science fiction adventure series. It's called EMBARK. After Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. It's a fast-paced and action-packed sci-fi adventure. If you like your science fiction to be epic, filled with some romance, really cool technology, ton of action, EMBARK is perfect for you. I wrote it for adults, but it's great for ages 11 and older. So, do me a favor. Go and pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. Again, 7 books in all in the series, available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook on Amazon.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Wherever you are listening to the podcast, be sure to subscribe to that platform with this podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. And listen to my weekly radio show, Monday through Friday, 6 until 9 a.m. Central Time on the Iheartradio app. Just search for Twin Cities News Talk or my name, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking this out. I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. A happy new year, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.